Hello and welcome to our continuing special coverage of the visit of the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, to India. This is a state visit and comes at a time when the overall global political environment is in a situation of flux, and as a result of that visit, the geopolitical spotlight will shift to New Delhi as President Putin's plane touches down for what are expected to be very, very crucial talks that could redefine cooperation between the two countries across energy, technology, trade, as well as defense. And we break down what to expect from the Modi-Putin meeting, what is driving this engagement, and what it could mean in the days ahead. And as we do that, there's a world exclusive interview that President Putin has granted to the India Today network, a very, very detailed interview at his office in Moscow. And that's going to break the entire interview, will play out across India Today properties, India Today television, Aaj Tak, Business Today, as well as all other properties of India's largest media group at 9 p.m. tonight. So before I get into the discussion, this is a heads up for all of you to tune in. And joining me to decode the implications of what President Putin has told the India Today network and what to expect on that visit are two very noted expert voices. Jayant Krishna, Senior Fellow of CSIS, as well as Ambassador Dr. Mohan, Kumar, a former diplomat. And before we go to our guests, I want to bring to you a small chunk of what President Putin had to tell the India Today network.
My question to you now would be about defense. And India continues to be the biggest defense buyer. Roughly 38% of the market from Russia is bought by India. My question to you, sir, is in view of the sanctions by the US or the tariffs they have laid on India, the arm twisting methods that are being adopted, and I name it's America. How do you plan to circumvent all this? Will you pull back or push harder?
Мне кажется, что и Индия, весь мир увидели.
Well, I think both the world and India have seen that one cannot talk to India the way they used to talk to it 77 years ago. India is a great power, not an English or British colony, and everyone will have to take that into account. And moreover, the head of the Indian government, Prime Minister Modi, is not one to give in to pressure. The Indian nation can take pride in their Prime Minister. It's absolutely evident Prime Minister Modi has a firm position, which is not, however, confrontational, nor are we going to enter into confrontation with anyone. We are simply trying to defend our legitimate interests, and that is exactly what India is doing. What are the obstacles? There's transactions and payments, but more than 90% of our transactions are carried out in national currencies. There are certain difficulties, of course, because there are intermediaries, but there are solutions to that, because we can transition to using the systems for financial messaging systems, which we have offered by the Bank of Russia and by our Indian counterparts, and we are doing this work steadily. And those who are taking steps to limit the economic cooperation of third parties sooner or later will incur losses. And I think once this understanding settles in completely and fully, then this practice of pressure from outside is going to...
Well, that was President Putin making it clear that India is a great power and that nobody could dictate India or arm twist India. And let me go across to our panel. A short bite really, Ambassador, but for the context and the strategic importance of the visit, how would you describe what is clearly a state visit?
Thank you very much for having me. I think this is hugely geopolitical important, really. This is of great geopolitical importance. I cannot imagine a more geopolitically important visit that's happened in the recent times. And that is because I think we have definitively shifted from a unipolar order to a multipolar world order. It's messy, it's very, very, shall I say, full of powers trying to jostle with each other. But the fact is, power is more widely distributed today than it was, let us say, 10 years ago. That, I think, is the context for the visit. But within the context, I think there's a lot of subtle geopolitical signaling that is, I think, crucial for viewers to understand. The first signaling I think India wants to do is, notwithstanding a judgment by the International Criminal Court against President Putin, notwithstanding the fact that there are sanctions on Russia from Europe, and notwithstanding the tenuous relationship that United States has with Russia, India wants to receive President Putin on a state visit. That's the first signal. It's very clear that we will do what is in our interest. The second thing I think that India is seeking to do is that we do have issues with United States when it comes to trade. And therefore, one of the obvious objectives of this visit will be to de-risk our exports. So we will be looking at export opportunities in Russia, not just for our garments, but also for shrimps, for textiles, for pharma products, all of which have had some issues in the Western market. So we are also trying to diversify, a goal that was made clear by the Commerce Minister some months ago. Last but not least, I think, is really the defense issue, on which I think India has been trying to diversify. But the more we diversify, the more I get the sentiment that some of the Russian offers are impossible to ignore by India. If Russia is able to offer full transfer of technology and offer to us state-of-the-art aircraft, state-of-the-art missiles, joint production and co-development and co-owning, then I think it'll be a situation where India will depend on defense to a great extent on Russia in this uncertain world. So all in all, to cut a long story short, and I don't want to take my co-panelists' time, but just to say that all eyes are on India. You are absolutely right. But geopolitical experts like me will be looking at the body language, will be looking at the outcome document of this visit, and will very closely look at reactions, particularly from United States and Europe. All the others are fine. They will make the usual boilerplate statements. But I think the reaction from the US and reaction from Europe will be important. There will also be the message on Ukraine. And I will be very interested to know if that figures in the joint statement or not. What kind of message will Prime Minister Modi convey to President Putin on this important aspect of the war in Ukraine? I will stop here for now.
Absolutely. Several headline points that you said, and just for the benefit of our viewers, and we'll follow those points during the course of this half-hour conversation. Apart from the strategic timing, really, and I can't recall, Ambassador Kumar, in my years of being a business journalist who's also covered the business part of diplomacy, of a visit that has been as significant. You know, US President's visit and Indian Prime Ministers visiting the United States used to be considered the apex, but I would say this is, perhaps in some ways exceeding that. Your point about diversifying exports, extremely crucial given the imbalance in the current trade, bilateral trade between India and Russia, and defense. And then finally, that old bear hug that kind of sent a chill all across America. You evoked that as well for our viewers to understand, and I'll request my producers if they can pull up any old footage of that old hug between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin. But to you, Jayant Krishna, break it down for us from the trade point of view. And I'm sure you have multiple points, but I'm going to come straight to the trade point. $69 billion in bilateral trade in FY25, but a huge imbalance. So 5 billion from India and 64 odd billion from Russia, even if you were to take out the crude oil part of it, as far as our trade goes, it is not India-Russia bye-bye. It is quite imbalanced. Is there any prospect of that imbalance being corrected?
No, absolutely, Siddharth. As the ambassador mentioned, the visit is quite important from a geopolitical standpoint. But the second most important thing which I see is about trade. If you go by purchasing power parity, India is the third largest economy already in the world, and Russia is the fourth largest economy, right? India is the most populous country. Russia is the ninth most populous country, and our population is about 10 times that of Russia, right? But if you look at the trade, in the year 2020, our trade deficit in favor of Russia was about $3.4 billion. Now, this year it has, 2024, last full year that we have the data of, it went up to $63 billion was the trade deficit against India in favor of Russia, largely because of crude oil. If you look at the overall basket of products, right, we buy defense equipment, a very large percentage of our overall imports of defense equipment from Russia, and of course crude oil is a very, very big chunk, And if you look at what we export to Russia, I think India cuts a sorry figure. I think that's one area where India needs to explore a lot of issues. And fortunately, there are not any significant tariff barriers for trade, for India to export to the Russia. It's largely non-tariff barrier. I see no reason why Russia shouldn't open its markets and give greater access to its market for Indian products. I'm especially talking about the farm products, the shrimps, marine products, pharmaceutical products, textiles, garments. I think there's a huge scope for India to, you can't, in today's world, you can't go on a one-way traffic where we only import from there and hardly export anything to that country. I think that's very, very important to my mind. And given, and let me tell you, this meet is not just happening between two countries and happening in New Delhi. The fact is, people in Washington, D.C. and Beijing are watching it with a far greater interest than India itself, right? So I think it is also coming of age of two nations. I don't have to reiterate about the ties India and Russia have, of the erstwhile USSR always enjoyed. And after, after the emergence of Russia as a separate country, I think since then we have had a very good relationship. And, so I think these things are very important. Just shifting the focus to defense, only one thing I wanted to mention here, it's not just we keep on importing equipment from there. But I think, during our recent conflict with Pakistan, the entire world saw that how we successfully deployed S-400 missiles, which were, leveraging the Russian technology, and we were quite successful. And now the next generation, which is the new S-500 upgraded version of that, I think India should co-manufacture, co-produce. That's very important. And even the Sukhoi 57, the fifth generation aircraft, I think we need to explore possibilities of how the technology gets transferred and under Make in India dream and ambition, we co-manufacture along with Russia in India. I think that's very important. Look at foreign direct investment. There's hardly anything we get from Russia at all, right? So I think, to my mind, a friendship, no matter how much close, how much historic it may be, but in today's day and age, if it has to carry on, there has to have a good footprint, both from a foreign direct investment point of view as well as a bilateral trade point of view, for which the two nations have agreed to have a target of $100 billion by the year 2030. And if crude oil goes down, then the actual amount of trade would shrink very substantially, right? So I think these kind of things we have to keep in mind. And today's day and age, to my mind, the economics, the trade, the investments, they go far beyond just geopolitics.
Viewers, for those who have tracked India's relationship with Russia, many of you in the recent context would recall a very, very historic judgment which had extremely negative consequences for India's telecom industry, and that was the abrupt cancellation of 2G licenses. And in that, Systema, which is one of the largest companies in Russia, Systema JFSC, lost a very, very significant amount of money. And I remember interviewing then ambassador to India, the late Alexander Karakin, someone who knew Sanskrit, was an Indophile. And in that interview, he told me that, do you think that Russia will forget that $1 billion plus of taxpayer money has been wasted for no fault of ours? And I still vividly remember that, and I would say that among all the other geopolitical ramifications, even that, the cancellation of Systema's license was perhaps a moment when Russian FDI, and because Jayant Krishna mentioned that point, I thought it is worthwhile to recount, Russian FDI into India suffered. Remember that investment had also meant that a renewed rupee-ruble arrangement had been put in place and led by then Finance Secretary of India, and it included not just the Finance Ministry but the RBI. So a lot of effort had been put in, but a judicial decision had such ramifications that I think perhaps now is the time that some of the shadows of that cancellation might be finally dealt with. Ambassador, I want to come to you for a moment, but before that we will play out for you viewers a small remark of Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, and then we continue with this discussion, and we hope to get you another couple of bites, slices from President Putin's conversation with us. But let's listen to Piyush Goyal for a moment.
Also a demographic dividend, the young, hardworking, talented, skilled men and women can fill Russia's large 3 million talent shortfall that I'm told exists. And I can assure you, our young people are not only very hardworking, they will not complain that it's Friday evening or it's Saturday and we need to go off. Our young men and women are driven, willing to work 7 days a week if the requirement is there. Willing to really put in long hours, a lot of hard work, very committed, very, very conscious of their responsibilities, outcome oriented. After all, we produce the world's largest number of STEM graduates, 2.4 million STEM graduates coming out of our universities and colleges every year.
Now that you heard that bite from Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, and he's talking about the ability of India to provide skilled manpower. Ambassador, I want to come to you on that, because this labor mobility pact, and we don't know if indeed that will come through. We will try and play out what President Putin had to say on the possibility of the agreements and the pacts that might be initialed. How significant is this going to be? Do you expect that this will indeed be something that the two countries agree on?
I think it's terribly important, frankly. And I think the Commerce Minister is spot on in trying to emphasize it. And I'll tell you why. As anti-immigration sentiment rises in the West, India needs to find avenues for its youth elsewhere. Okay? It is no longer possible to have the kind of emigration, not immigration, but emigration potential in the West. And that's just a statement of fact. Whether you're going to have the same number of people migrating to US, Europe, etc., is questionable. In the context of that, and against that backdrop, it is extremely important if we can find alternative markets like Russia, where, as you know, there is a population crisis, there are not enough people. But more importantly, and I want to say this, Russia, by developing ties with India generally, but also seeking Indians in particular, is a way of de-risking from China. Russia may have a no-limits partnership with China, but make no mistake, I don't think Russia will relish the possibility of just being a junior partner to China. It is too proud a civilization, too proud a country to have that kind of junior status. So Russia in its own way does not want to put all eggs in the Chinese basket. A number of Chinese are already moving into Russia and Siberia, etc. So it is my sense that even from a political point of view, Russia would be interested in seeking the entry of Indian youth. I think the problem is actually traditionally Russia has been in favor of European immigration and not necessarily from Asia. But that is a mindset change that Russia may be willing to make at this point. I'm quite eager to see what kind of outcome will come about in the conversations that India and Russia will have on the subject. But as I said, as India seeks alternative avenues for its youth, and as Russia seeks to de-risk from China, I see a convergence from a geopolitical perspective for Russia to actually welcome youth, especially highly specialized engineers and others who I think can serve the Russian economy well. So I do see this as an important subject, frankly, Siddharth.
Jayant, that very same topic to you in terms of its significance, and if I may say, H1B, a household word for tens of millions of Indians. Maybe there will be a Russian equivalent of it, perhaps called the S1000. I don't know. Jayant Krishna, a quick comment on the possibilities and the potential of such a arrangement.
Oh, absolutely. I think Russia being an aging economy, right? Its population is aging. The median age of Indian workforce is just about 29 years, right? In Russia, it is in 40s, right? So I think it has to bother about its aging population, and where else on earth they would get such a large number of, as the Minister Piyush Goyal says, of STEM graduates as in India, right? So I think they have to open the floodgates, and I can tell you as a former CEO of the National Skill Development Corporation that plays a pivotal role in Prime Minister's Skill India mission, that I think we have similar ties with Japan and so on and so forth, where they are welcoming Indian people as apprentices initially, and then after that they have a choice whether they want to remain in Japan for the rest of their lives or come back. I think a similar kind of structure needs to be put in place with Russia as well. And Russia has to throw open its doors. I think that's very, very important. If more and more Indians get work opportunities in Russia, who stands to gain more? I think it is Russia which has a huge talent deficit as well as an aging population. So I see as a huge opportunity. That area must be discussed, must be taken forward. And and there's already a good amount of cultural diplomacy which has been there between the two countries since a very long time, spanning films, music, dances, yoga, culture, and so on and so forth. I think, and more youth who go from India and work in Russia, I think it's going to yield a huge lot of not only economic and skills benefits, but also cultural benefits to that country and to both the countries actually.
Okay, viewers, just focus on the possibility of a labor mobility pact, and that too, apart from diversifying our exports, and both our experts have spoken about that the opportunity that the 50% higher tariffs to the United States has meant for Indian exporters is to work a bit harder, get around perhaps the negative consequences of the 35,000 odd sanctions that have been imposed on Russia by the West over the last 3 odd years. I know that is a real factor that is coming in the way of Indian multinational corporations to do more business with Russia. Many of those industry captains that I have been speaking to say that they would want to, they understand the market, there is a good opportunity, but they are worried about the consequences for the other global businesses. So, that's also a real factor. We'll also get you a couple of more bites, including what President Putin had to say about India's growth But before that, a small aside, and I'll request my producers to bring up some of that footage that they were showing of Prime Minister Modi, but many years ago, being in Russia. You can see him right there on the screen if we can go full frame and try and hold that for our viewers to focus on. And you see a much younger looking Putin on screen. You see the late Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and that's present Prime Minister Modi there. And like his experience all across India, he's also pretty experienced when it comes to the West. Many of you might have seen his photographs traveling through the United States, almost like a backpacker, really, for a month or so. Again, that photograph and that trip goes back many, many years, perhaps almost 3 decades. But here you see Prime Minister Modi there, and when you will see them again from the visuals that will emerge from the present visit, you can, well, and you have other people there, that's Jaswant Singh, and you have Brijesh Mishra, the former National Security Advisor, and both of them, when they were alive and when they were in power, had very significant roles to play. But let's come back to the discussion. Ambassador Kumar, I want to ask you about a broader question. For years we were non-aligned. Then we moved to a stage where it seemed that we were moving and making the United States the fulcrum of our global engagement. Is India now at a point in its diplomatic evolution and journey confronting the challenge of multi-alignment? Because our interests cannot be served by just one country or one bloc. Is multi-alignment the future, and how well placed are we to meet that challenge, Ambassador Kumar?
Yes, I think you are right. It's hard to deny that India is following a policy of multi-alignment. I would say this up front, and I don't want to be misunderstood. I still think the India-US relationship is extremely consequential. I think it is the most consequential that we have, but there are other strategic partnerships that are extremely important. And that has got to do with the fact that the unipolar moment in the world, when the US was the only superpower, has ended, has definitively ended. In my view, Siddharth, there are 3 great powers in the world today. US and China are obvious. Russia is less obvious. You know, some people tend to think of Russia as a middle power. I think that would be a serious mistake. Russia is a great power. It may be a lesser great power than US and China at this point, but make no mistake, Russia has all the criteria that actually enables it to be called a great power. In this scenario, if India's policy of multi-alignment has to find meaning, then you need to engage with all 3. That's what we are doing. China is, of course, a strategic adversary, but still it does not prevent India from engaging with China. US will continue to be an important relationship, but I think a policy of multi-alignment by definition means that you have to engage with all great powers and indeed all other powers. You have to utilize all the cards at your disposal, and you have to play the long game. That is what India's multi-alignment is all about. If you allow me, I will repeat: engaging with all powers, utilizing all the cards that we have, and finally playing the long game. That is what we are doing, I believe, and that is how you should situate the President Putin visit to India at this especially fraught geopolitical moment for the world.
Absolutely, significant words, and I'm reminded of certain snarky comments that some people, those that belong to the WhatsApp university, have made in the past about Prime Minister Modi's frequent foreign travels and engagement around the world, with some people even saying, "Bahar kyun jate ho aap? Apne desh mein samay nikalo." Listen to what Ambassador Kumar is saying. I'll also come to Jayant on the same question. that you live in a very, very changed, different world, and having relationships with everyone is going to be an extremely challenging task. And the fact that today India is having trade negotiations with 15 countries and trading blocs is by itself an indication of both the opportunity and the challenge. Jayant, add to what Ambassador Kumar had to say on the issue of the multi-alignment challenge that we have.
So I think, one thing is very clear, while our ties with the US continue to be very important, and we must ensure that, soon enough we come out with a bilateral trade agreement between the two countries, because a lot of discussions have happened in the last, 10 months or so on and so forth. But I think, India should avoid laying all eggs in the American basket, which is already evident. We have a free trade agreement with the UK. We have a similar free trade agreement with the United Arab Emirates. With Australia, something very similar has been there. We have been negotiating with the European Union, which is the second largest market for India.
And hopefully that will come through, Jayant. Hopefully, very soon, possibly the EU trade deal.
So I think there's still some stumbling blocks, I'm told, but a lot of headway has happened, and I'm sure that would happen. Even with countries like Canada, India is discussing. So I think, there's also, we should explore the possibilities of having a similar free trade agreement with Russia as well. I think that's very, very important. And, there are several, during the course of this discussion, we have discussed about several products. But another very important sector that comes to my mind is, these modular and small reactors, as India is opening its atomic energy area for the private sector. I think these reactors are in a space where the technology exists in Russia, and we must explore initially to import those from Russia and go forward. So I think it's a huge, we've all discussed how important this
viewers, what Jayant Krishna is referring to is something that I read about in a government document well over 20 years ago, and these I vividly remember was a briefcase-sized nuclear reactor, and this is not wild imagination, based on the thorium energy cycle, of which Rajasthan and some other regions in our country are blessed to have extremely high quantities of reserves. Some people claim that our thorium reserves are amongst the largest in the world. And again, many, many years ago, and this is the lost opportunity with Russia, there were initial conversations, although the technology cycle had not matured, viewers, of an exchange of this technology between Russia and India. It didn't happen then. I hope it happens now, and it would be significant. As we come to the last part of our conversation, I want to request my producers to play out another slice of that conversation, and then we will conclude with comments from our experts.
According to plan, on the whole, we're happy with the economic situation. And what's most important this month, I'm very happy that I'm going to meet, as you have just pointed out, my friend, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. We agreed to meet in India a long time ago. There's a lot to talk about because the range of our cooperation with India is very huge. I'm not even talking about history of our relations because this history is of a unique nature. And I would also like to point out that the path that India has traveled since gaining its independence, just over the 77 years, which is a very short span in the scale of history, and India has managed to travel a great way. And I'm going to dwell on that a little bit later. But, when we live our daily lives, we hardly notice the changes that are currently afoot. It rarely happens when we notice these changes. But if we have a look back at the history, we'll see that what transpired in India is, to a large extent,
Мало, наверное, у вас кто знает, что...
Well, I don't think there are many people who live in India who know that the longevity, the life expectancy of India over the 77 years has
We will
more than
talk
doubled.
about longevity in some time from now.
Да, хорошо, поговорим обязательно. Но, во всяком
Certainly
случае,
going to talk about that.
наши отношения
But
с
be that as it may, our relations with India are developing across different ranges, different.
President Putin calling India's journey over the past 77 years and terming it almost a miracle. Ambassador Kumar, in your closing comments also reflect on this remark of President Putin. State visits, and when such occurrences happen, every side talks highly about the other side. That's part of the nature of diplomacy. Of course, the United States seems to be have broken trend from that, President Trump, but that's not the focus of our discussion, neither is the focus of our discussion today. That doubt in my mind that does this visit also mean that the US trade deal will continue to remain on the back burner, but let's leave that for some other time. Ambassador Kumar, give us your concluding thoughts on the subject and the matter that we just heard President Putin talk about.
No, he sounds like a genuine admirer of India's trajectory of progress. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You can't, I don't believe you can fake these things. He seems genuinely admirative of exactly the trajectory that India has traversed from its independence. The second thing he gently hints is that this visit is long overdue. He says, and I think you should interpret, so I propose to watch your interview at 9 o'clock and then write something about it, because he says this visit was planned many, many months ago. So this is a much postponed visit actually. His visit to India was long overdue, and for a variety of reasons that I will allow you to imagine, I don't want to spell it out, I think the visit couldn't happen. So the visit is long overdue. One last point, Siddharth. I think I want your viewers to know that in the US-Russia negotiations in the context of finding a resolution to the problem of Ukraine, they are discussing security, they are discussing territory. But the third aspect that they are discussing is a renewal of commercial, financial and economic ties between US and Russia, and inclusion of Russia as part of the G7 so that G7 can become G8. So US itself is discussing with Russia how to promote economic commercial relations in the medium to long term post-conflict Ukraine. So there can be no complaint actually from anybody about India trying to reinforce what we think is the most important legacy strategic partnership that we have had with Russia.
Kumar, since you teased that point, let me try and request our producers to play out President Putin's answer on, and where he seems to have spoken about the G8. If we have that bite, we can play that out, because that answers in some ways the point that Ambassador Kumar just mentioned.
Do you want to go back to being a part of the G8? Because that's a lot, there are a lot of reports on that. So is that something that Russia is looking at?
Нет.
No.
That's an interesting answer, sir. You're very clear about that.
Да.
Well, yes.
Дело вот в чем. Дело в том,
The thing is,
я когда-то так случилось, я сейчас не буду вдаваться в
well,
детали.
I'm not going into detail, but I basically stopped going to these meetings back in the past.
Не очень понятно, почему
That's the first thing. Secondly,
входящие
I can hardly understand why countries of the G7
G7
call themselves G7, you know, in Russia it's called G like for great, big. The thing is, India's economy in purchasing power ranks third. And what about the UK or other countries in terms of purchasing parity
какой 10-й, там мне уж
capacity? I think it's the 10th place or something like that. I don't remember.
Конечно, это все страны с
Yes,
высокотехнологичными.
these countries have a high-tech economy with a very solid foundation, which is still very much there, even though their share and the world economy is shrinking year round,
Тенденция, она такая, какая она есть. Она будет
inexorably. And the trend is there, and it's going to persist, apparently.
совершенно, ну, так скажем, аккуратненько.
Well,
На мой взгляд,
let's put it mildly. I think this is going to happen due to the erroneous policy pursued by the authorities of many of these countries.
рецессия в Германии очевидно.
Let's have a look at the recession in Germany. It's very much there for the third year in a row. France is in a very difficult spot right now on the brink of recession, and the same applies to other leading European economies. But that said, the G7 is still an important platform. They are working on something, discussing things, making some decisions. Good health to them and all the best. But, you know, at a certain point in time, I simply stopped going to these meetings, and it was not due to developments in Ukraine. These were due to other events, other developments. I'm not going to go into detail right now.
Проинформировали американских наших.
And, you know, we informed our American counterparts on that. And
Ambassador Krishna, very interesting and very definitive niyat.
Sorry, was this the question?
You
to
want
me?
me to say something?
Ambassador Krishna, what did you make of President Putin's no, the niyat that he said right away at the start of that answer?
Yeah. So I think, you know, the impression I got, I mean, I need to go through the entire interview, but the impression I got is almost saying as if he doesn't want to waste too much time and resources, you know, in attending these meetings of different economic blocs and other political groupings, you know, despite the fact that Russia is also, you know, continues to be a member of the UN, of BRICS, of G20, of SCO.
Right.
But that's the impression I got, what he intended to say, you know, I think another interesting aspect which I would really like to see in the joint statement at the end of the visit, if one gets released, you know, what do they say about ending the Ukraine aggression? I think that's something, the war, I think that is something India has always been saying, that a sovereign nation has been attacked, and then sooner than later there should be a ceasefire. So I would also like to see how it happens. Another quick comment that, you know, I think President Putin has been has praised India's economic resurgence, and we all know that Indian economy has done very well. But I with a bit of a you know, a small clause I would like to put in. If you look at you know, the Indian economy, I think we vis-a-vis some other Asian economies like Japan, which was completely devastated after the World War, or South Korea, you know, which also faced a very, very, very bad war for a long time, and even a country like Singapore, you know, which was a underdeveloped country, you know, in 50s and 60s and so on and so forth, you know, how their economic recovery has been. I think India still has a long way to go, and the process of reforming big time, big ticket reforms have to continue in India. And I'm sure, you know, I think as just, you know, I mean, we are already the largest growing major economy in the world, right? But I think we have to go a long way till, you know, our per capita income also improves, our Human Development Index ranking improves, and so on and so forth. I think it's very, very interesting.
Ambassador Krishna, I'm completely out of time, apologies, but a quick 30-second reply, because you raised the point about the G7 and the return to that discussion, and you heard President Putin's reply. A quick comment from you, sir.
No, very, very briefly. I think he has got the right response. He says the whole power has shifted to the east, and it is countries like India and China that matter, not the old Western economies. So he says, why should Russia be begging to kind of be included in G7? Eventually, he may not turn it down if they offer G7, because I think it is important for Russia that Western sanctions are lifted soon. But other than that, I understand his response. It's a realpolitik response. It's a response from a very shrewd leader who knows which way the power is shifting. Thank you.
Absolutely, and that power shift is underway, and for India to also align itself and in a multi-alignment kind of play will be very, very significant. But viewers, as I thank my guests here today, I also want to once again remind you that tune in to India Today platforms, India Today Television, Aaj Tak, Business Today, and a whole host of other platforms from the India Today group, India's largest media group. to catch that world exclusive of President Vladimir Putin. 9 p.m. tonight. Until then, goodbye.